The first thing Nathaniel Harcourt heard his future wife say was that she would sooner lose Wardmere than purchase its safety with another family's ruin. He stood beyond the half-closed door of the estate room, with the autumn rain of northern Buckinghamshire on his borrowed coat and mud drying on boots no duke would have admitted owning. Inside, a man struck the desk hard enough to rattle the inkstand. Miss Elinor Ward did not raise her voice. That made her refusal carry farther. The addendum gives Ravensmere Hall sole command of the millrace, she said. It also permits the holder to close the lower channel without notice. If I sign it, 12 tenant farms lose water in a dry summer. The village mill loses its legal intake, and every household owing grain rent becomes dependent upon one man's price. I will not sign. Sir Gideon March, Elinor's maternal uncle, former guardian, and a trustee named as executor in Sir Thomas's will, answered with the slow contempt of a man accustomed to disguising orders as advice. Through a London partnership, he also controlled Wardmere's principal mortgage note. You mistake a legal formality for a moral crusade. Your father owes more than this estate can pay. The Duke of Ravensmere arrives a week on Monday to discuss the marriage articles. Refuse this concession, and he may refuse the match. Then, I call the mortgage before Christmas. Then the bank will take it with my name clean. Nathaniel had crossed 60 wet miles to discover whether the woman chosen for him was grasping, theatrical, or secretly in league with the men, pressing him to consolidate the river rights. His land agent had supplied reports describing Miss Ward as ambitious, imperious with tenants, and eager to trade a failing baronetcy for a ducal coronet. Nathaniel had expected to catch her rehearsing smiles for his arrival. Instead, he heard papers slide across the desk and the scratch of a pen that stopped before it touched the page. Think of your father, Sir Gideon said. I have thought of little else for 3 years. That is why I know precisely what he would say if illness had not taken his speech. Stewardship is not ownership without obligation. If the Duke wishes to marry me only on condition that I help him strip the village of a right older than either family, he may keep his title. There was a silence in which the rain seemed to fill every gutter at Wardmere. Nathaniel's hand tightened around the plain felt hat he carried. The sentence had not merely contradicted Jasper Vane's reports. It had exposed the ugliness hidden inside a document Nathaniel himself had not read closely. He had authorized Vane to negotiate a practical settlement between 2 neighboring estates. He had not authorized the extinction of village water rights. Duty had made Nathaniel exacting. Weariness had made him trust a man who understood how to bury theft beneath orderly columns. The door opened without warning. Nathaniel stepped back, but not quickly enough. Sir Gideon emerged first, broad in the shoulders and red at the cheeks. His silver-headed cane tucked beneath one arm. His gaze travelled over the mud, the rough, dark coat, and the leather case Nathaniel had deliberately scuffed before leaving Ravensmere. Who are you? Nathaniel lowered his eyes just enough. Nathan Hale. Sir, sent from Ravensmere to assist with the autumn accounts until Mr. Vane arrives. The name was close enough to his own that he would answer to it without hesitation. The rest had been arranged through his solicitor and one loyal groom. Nathaniel Harcourt, Duke of Ravensmere, was expected in a closed carriage a week on Monday. Nate Hale, temporary Under-Steward, had arrived on Friday evening in the rain. Sir Gideon's suspicion softened into disregard. Another of Vane's clerks. You may discover that Wardmere has too many opinions and too little money. Wait in the servants' hall. He will wait nowhere until I know what work he can do. Elinor said from the doorway. She was not the ornament Nathaniel's imagination had constructed from society notices. She wore a dove blue wool gown with narrow sleeves, a plain white collar, and a belt from which hung 2 small keys and a pencil in a leather loop. Her brown hair had been pinned for usefulness rather than display, though the damp air had loosened a strand beside one cheek. Her hazel eyes went first to his face, then to his case, his boots, and the frayed cuff he had rubbed with a stone that morning. He had the odd impression that she had inventoried him in a single glance. "Can you keep a double-entry ledger?" "Mr. Hale, yes." "Miss, read a lease, if the hand is legible." "Ride in poor weather. I arrived in it." Something almost like amusement touched her mouth, then vanished. "Good. Our regular steward broke his leg last week. The West Granary count is incomplete. 3 Michaelmas rents have been disputed. And the miller claims the upper sluice is leaking. If Ravensmere has sent you to observe us before the Duke arrives, you may as well observe useful work." Sir Gideon turned sharply. "Elinor, my uncle believes accounts should wait until men have settled the important matters. I have found that accounts often reveal which matters are important." Nathaniel met her gaze. He had heard courage through a door. Now he saw intelligence sharpened by fatigue. She did not know that the man she had just defied stood within arm's reach. She did not know that his signature had begun the negotiation she mistrusted. Shame came to him as a new and unwelcome sensation. He concealed it with the expression London called cold, and servants at Ravensmere called impossible. "Show me the ledgers," he said. Elinor's brows lifted at the note of command that escaped him. "I shall show you the table where they are kept. What you make of them will determine whether I show you anything else." She led him through a house that bore poverty with discipline. Wardmere was neither grand nor ruined. Its brick front had faded to the soft red of old leaves, and ivy, worried at the mortar around windows, repaired with care rather than replaced. Fires burned in only the occupied rooms. Carpets had been turned to hide worn edges. A silver vase in the hall held rosemary instead of hothouse flowers. Nothing was neglected. But everything had been asked to last 1 year longer than it should. The estate room overlooked the river valley. Maps covered one wall, their corners weighted by brass tacks. On another stood shelves of rent rolls, seed records, veterinary notes, and folded correspondence tied in colours Nathaniel recognized as a practical filing system. A narrow bed had been placed near the fire for Sir Thomas Ward. The old baronet lay propped against pillows, his body diminished by illness, but his eyes alert. Elinor crossed to him at once. "Father, Ravensmere has sent an under-steward. Mr. Hale." "This is Sir Thomas." Nathaniel bowed. Sir Thomas studied him with a steadiness that made disguise feel childish. One trembling hand moved across the coverlet toward a slate. Elinor placed it beneath his fingers and waited while he formed 3 uneven words. "Watch the north gate. I checked it at noon," she said gently. "The hinge will hold until the smith comes." Sir Thomas tapped the slate again and looked at Nathaniel. "Perhaps he means you are to watch it." Elinor said, "My father remembers every gate, ditch, ever, and tenant on Wardmere." Speech failed him. Stewardship did not. Nathaniel wondered what his own late father would have remembered at the end. The 5th Duke had known the vintages in his cellar and the losses at every gaming table, from London to Brighton. He had not known the names of the miners injured beneath Ravensmere land, nor the roofs that leaked in the east cottages. Nathaniel had spent 7 years repairing consequences he had not created. In doing so, he had begun to believe vigilance could be delegated so long as reports arrived on time. Elinor gave him the West Granary book, a bundle of leases, and a list of households whose rents had been delayed after the summer fever. Begin with these. Mark discrepancies in pencil. Do not alter the ink. You expect discrepancies, I expect facts. Discrepancies arrive without invitation. She moved to the map wall and began comparing Sir Gideon's addendum with an older river plan. Nathaniel sat at the table. The first pages were orderly. The later entries had the appearance of order without its substance. Totals balanced because a hand had shifted grain from relief allotments into ordinary rent. 3 tenants appeared in arrears, despite receipts pinned to their leases. Beside 2 names. A faint mark, shaped like a hooked thorn, had been pressed into the paper. He had seen that mark before. Jasper Vane used it in private memoranda to indicate property suitable for consolidation. Nathaniel looked toward Elinor. She was bending over the river plan. One finger following the lower channel from Wardmere's weir to the mill, and then across the boundary into Ravensmere pasture. If she were conspiring with Vane, she performed innocence with extraordinary discipline. If she were not, then his agent had marked her tenants for removal and lied to him about who desired it. Miss Ward, who enters the grain rents, Mr. Bell did before his accident. I enter them now. My uncle sometimes gives directions to the granary keeper when I am with my father, and the relief allotments, authorized by me, witnessed by the rector, and sealed from father's desk. Does your uncle hold a key to that desk? Her head came up. Why? Because 6 sacks issued to fever households were later entered as missing rent. Either the grain walked back into the granary and changed its name, or someone wishes those households to appear indebted. She came beside him so quickly that her skirt brushed the chair. Nathaniel showed her the entries and the receipts. She read in silence, her shoulder near his. The faint scent of rainwater and lavender soap reached him, absurdly distinct amid ink, dust, and coal smoke. These figures were not here on Tuesday. She said, I balanced this page myself. The ink is newer. Can you prove that? Not yet. Then we do not accuse. We verify. It was the answer he would have given. That recognition unsettled him more than beauty would have done. They worked until the light failed. Elinor questioned every altered entry, but never shaped a fact to fit her suspicion. She sent a maid for the rector's relief list and a stable boy for the granary keeper. When supper was announced, she looked surprised, as if hours had passed without consulting her. Sir Gideon did not return. Sir Thomas slept. Nathaniel closed the final lease and found Elinor watching his hands. You do not write like a junior clerk, she said. My former employer disliked errors, and yet he let you leave. I did not say he let me. That earned him a brief, real smile. It altered her face not by making it prettier, but by making reserve seem a door rather than a wall. The housekeeper will find you a room above the old coach house. We begin at the granary before sunrise. You begin before sunrise. Grain does not become more honest after breakfast. At Ravensmere, no one would have dared laugh at Nathaniel. At Wardmere, disguised and damp and increasingly ashamed, he did. The rain stopped during the night, leaving the world silver with mist. Nathaniel woke in a narrow room to the bell of the dairy yard and the unfamiliar freedom of having no valet wait upon him. He shaved with cold water, put on the rough coat, and found Elinor already in the west yard with a lantern, a ring of keys, and 2 thick slices of bread wrapped in cloth. One is yours, she said. Mrs. Finch believes any man expected to count grain before dawn must be fed or buried. A severe housekeeper. A practical one. They crossed the yard together. The granary stood on stone piers above the damp, its oak doors banded in iron. Elinor tested the seal, then held the lantern while Nathaniel examined the lock. Fine scratches surrounded the keyhole. The wax impressed beneath the latch carried Sir Thomas's heron crest. But one wing was blurred. "It was sealed yesterday," Elinor said. "With which seal?" "The small estate seal from Father's desk. This impression was made from a copy, or from wax pressed too cold. You know a surprising amount about seals. A former employer taught me to distrust anything that can be made official by pressure." Her glance rested on him, thoughtful rather than suspicious. She broke the seal and opened the doors. Cool grain scent rolled out. "The keeper, Amos Reed." He arrived rubbing sleep from his eyes and swearing he had issued nothing after Tuesday. They measured each bin with marked rods, weighed sample sacks, and compared the tally to the book. 7 sacks were missing, not 6. A trail of pale kernels had lodged between floorboards near the rear loading hatch. Elinor crouched without concern for her gown and touched the wood. The hatch was opened from inside, or left unbarred for someone who entered from the yard. Amos looked stricken. "Miss, I swear upon my mother's grave." "Do not swear. Remember." Her tone was kind, but it did not soften the command. "Who came here on Wednesday, Sir Gideon's man? Said he was checking for damp. Then Mr. Vane rode over from Ravensmere near dusk. I saw his bay tied by the cider shed." Nathaniel kept his face still. Elinor noticed. "You know Jasper Vane, by reputation." "What reputation?" "Exact. Ambitious. Useful to a man who prefers results to questions." That sounds less like reputation than warning. Before he could answer, a horn sounded from the river. One long note, followed by 2 short. Amos swore. Elinor was already moving. The mill. They ran through the yard and down the slope. Morning mist hung low over the water. But the river's voice had changed. It struck the banks with a brown, muscular force, carrying branches from hills that must have taken more rain than Wardmere. At the mill, men clustered beside the wheel. The upper sluice shuddered in its frame. Water frothed through a split in the timber gate. The miller, Robert Shaw, thrust a folded report at Elinor. "I sent this to Sir Gideon 3 weeks ago. The brace is rotten through. I never saw it. His man said repairs were delayed until the Duke's survey." Nathaniel examined the gate. The main brace had been weakened by years of water, but a newer cut crossed the remaining sound wood. Not sabotage enough to break it in ordinary flow, enough to make failure certain in a flood. "We need to lower the side gate," Elinor said. "Its chain is rusted." Shaw replied. "Takes 4 men and a prayer. Then find 4 men who pray while pulling." Nathaniel stripped off his coat. "The upper beam will not hold if the pressure rises. Clear the mill floor and move the flour above the red mark." Elinor looked at him. "How do you know the red mark?" He had inspected Ravensmere's mills after a spring flood and knew where sensible millers marked danger. "Because the wheel pit is already taking backwater. Ask me after we move the grain." She did not waste another second. That was the beginning of their work together. Not the polite arrangement of ledgers, but the swift division of danger. Elinor sent boys to every riverside cottage and ordered carts for the meal sacks. Nathaniel put men on ropes at the side gate and climbed the wet platform above the wheel to free the jammed pawl. She seemed to know where he would need help before he called. He learned that her orders were obeyed because she knew the strength of each person receiving them. The chain moved 1 link, then stopped. Water surged against the gate. Nathaniel braced both boots and hauled until his shoulders burned. Below him, Elinor tied a second rope around the capstan and sent it through the spokes for leverage. "That will split the spindle," he called. "Not if we turn with the pressure instead of against it. Mr. Shaw, wait for the drop." "Now?" The men heaved. The side gate descended 1/2 foot. Water punched through the opening and dragged a broken branch into the channel. The rope snapped. Elinor stumbled toward the edge. Nathaniel caught her around the waist. For one suspended instant, she was against him. Breathless. One hand gripping his shirt. The river thundered below. Her hazel eyes widened, then steadied. "You may release me." "Mr. Hale, when your feet are beneath you." "They are." Both of them. She looked down. Found one boot balanced on the lip of the platform, and allowed him to pull her back another step. "I appear to stand breath," corrected. It was the first sound of fear he had heard from her, and it vanished beneath purpose. She retied the rope herself. By noon the flower had been moved. The side gate lowered, and the weakened upper sluice secured with a temporary crossbeam. The river continued to rise. Nathaniel expected Elinor to return to the house, change her soaked gown, and leave men to watch. Instead, she walked the lower bank, entering each cottage, checking hearths, counting children, and marking on a damp sheet which carts would carry which families if the water crossed the older routes. At the cottage of Mary Pike, a widow with 3 children, Elinor found an eviction notice nailed beside the door. The paper bore the Ravensmere estate heading and Jasper Vane's signature. It declared the holding forfeit due to unpaid grain rent. "I paid," Mary said. "Miss Ward saw the receipt." "I did." Elinor removed the notice carefully, rather than tearing it. "You will remain here tonight, if the bank is safe. Tomorrow, we answer this." Nathaniel read the notice. Vane had issued it under authority Nathaniel had granted for genuine defaults. The phrase, "by direction of his grace," stood above the signature. It seemed to burn through the rain. "Mr. Hale, does the Duke know his name is used this way?" He could have offered a comfortable lie. Instead, he said, "He knows his agent has authority. I do not believe he knows what has been done with it. Authority is what a man permits in his absence." The judgment was quiet. Nathaniel felt it land where excuses had protected him for years. "Then perhaps absence is the first failure," he said. Elinor folded the notice. "Perhaps. But if a man corrects a failure only when it embarrasses him, the tenants remain tools in another sort of performance. What would correction require truth first? Restitution second. A system that does not depend upon the virtue of one duke or the honesty of one agent. Then time. No one spoke to Nathaniel like this, because no one who knew his rank believed they could. He had put on a servant's coat to learn the truth about Elinor Ward. The coat was teaching him the truth about himself. The river crossed the older routes shortly after dusk. Wardmere's bell rang 3 times. Lanterns appeared along the bank. Rain began again, hard and slanting, turning the lane into black paste. Elinor stood in the granary yard with a list protected beneath oilcloth and sent carts in pairs to the lower cottages. Nathaniel returned from the weir, with water streaming from his hair. "The temporary brace is bowing," he told her. "If it fails, the mill yard floods first. Then the Pike cottages." "How long? An hour? Perhaps less. Can we release more water through the old East Channel?" Shaw shook his head. "It was filled 20 years ago." Elinor stared toward the orchard. "Not filled. Covered. Father showed it to me when I was 12. The mouth lies behind the abandoned cider press." Nathaniel seized a lantern. "Show me." They found the channel beneath nettles and 2 courses of loose stone. Men brought picks. Women carried the smaller rocks away in baskets. Elinor worked beside them until her palms bled through her gloves. Nathaniel ordered her to stop, forgot he was not a duke, and received a look sharp enough to cut oak. You may advise, Mr. Hale. You may even persuade. You may not command my hands while every other pair is needed. Your hands keep this operation ordered. Then do not waste them by arguing. He swallowed an answer and took the pick from an exhausted tenant instead. Water found the first gap with a hiss. They widened it until a dark stream rushed through the orchard channel toward empty meadow. The level beside the mill dropped an inch. Then 2. A shout rose from the granary. One of the evacuation carts had overturned, spilling meal sacks into the mud. Elinor ran. Nathaniel beside her. They found Sir Gideon's groom, standing over a frightened driver and insisting the sacks be taken to March's private storehouse on higher ground. Those sacks are marked for the river families. Elinor said. Sir Gideon ordered them secured. They are secure when they reach the people for whom they were milled. The groom glanced at Nathaniel as if seeking male confirmation. Nathaniel stepped aside. You heard Miss Ward. Elinor's eyes flicked toward him, recognizing the choice. Together they lifted the first sack. Others followed. Within minutes, the cart was righted and moving toward the schoolhouse where displaced families waited. At midnight, the upper sluice broke. The crack carried across the valley like a musket shot. The gate tore loose, struck the wheel, and shattered 2 paddles. Water burst across the mill floor. Nathaniel and Shaw were inside moving the final flour bins. Elinor saw the wall of brown water through the open door. Nate. It was the first time she used the name he had given rather than his surname. He turned at the sound. The miller slipped behind him. One leg caught beneath a fallen beam. Nathaniel could have reached the door. Instead, he went back. The water struck his thighs. He and Shaw dragged at the beam, but it had wedged beneath the axle. Outside, Elinor looped a cart rope around the doorpost and shouted for the trace horse. Nathaniel understood before she finished. He pushed the rope through the flood toward her. She caught it, fastened it around the beam, and drove the horse forward with 3 men at the harness. The beam shifted. Nathaniel pulled Shaw free. They reached the door as part of the floor collapsed behind them. Elinor took Shaw's weight on one side and Nathaniel on the other. The 3 of them staggered through water to the rise. Only when the miller was beneath a blanket did Elinor turn on Nathaniel. Rain shone on her face. You went back. He could not walk. That is not an explanation. It is the only one I have. She looked as if she wanted to strike him and embrace him, and considered both equally unreasonable. You frightened me. The words were nearly lost beneath the river. Nathaniel forgot his title, his purpose, and every guarded year between boyhood and this storm. He lifted one hand toward her cheek, stopped before touching it, and let it fall. I am sorry, he said. She searched his face. So am I. Dawn revealed damage without tragedy. The old channel had saved the lower cottages. The mill wheel was broken, the floor ruined, and half the flour spoiled. But no life had been lost. Families slept on pallets in the schoolhouse. Mrs. Finch stirred porridge in an iron wash kettle. Sir Thomas had been carried to the drawing room, where he could see carts return through the windows. Sir Gideon appeared at 8 in dry boots and demanded to know who had authorized the distribution of reserve grain. I did, Elinor said. That reserve secures the banknote. People secure the estate. Sentiment will not satisfy creditors. Neither will drowned tenants. His cane struck the floor. You have exceeded every authority your father allowed. Sir Thomas made a harsh sound from his chair. His hand shook toward the slate. Elinor knelt to steady it. He wrote one word. Mine. Sir Gideon's face hardened. Father says the authority is mine. Elinor said. If you dispute his capacity, do so before witnesses and a physician. Until then, do not countermand me on Wardmere land. Nathaniel watched Sir Gideon's gaze shift toward him. Something calculating replaced anger. And this clerk from Ravensmere, he seems remarkably willing to take your side. Mr. Hale took the side of men trapped in a flooded mill. Perhaps he has other instructions. The warning struck close. Elinor glanced at Nathaniel, but he could not read whether doubt had entered her. Sir Gideon left for the east wing. Nathaniel knew he should follow, reveal himself, and end the deception before it became unforgivable. Yet Vane was due the next day. If Nathaniel disclosed his identity now, both men would destroy or move whatever proof remained. That was the argument he offered conscience. Beneath it lay a more selfish truth. Nate Hale had earned a place beside Elinor in a single night. The Duke of Ravensmere did not know whether she would permit him the same. The next 3 days remade Wardmere around necessity. The broken mill meant grain had to be sent 6 miles upstream for grinding. Elinor negotiated wagon teams, set fair priority for households, and opened the stable loft for dry storage. She did not sleep more than a few hours. Neither did Nathaniel. They inspected leases at the schoolhouse, while children recited sums in the next room. They walked boundary ditches with Robert Shaw on crutches. They measured the old East Channel and calculated how much stone would be needed to line it before winter. Elinor did not treat the flood as an isolated misfortune. She traced every failure backward to the decision that made it possible. The repair requests all stopped here, she said one afternoon, spreading correspondence across a classroom desk. Mr. Shaw sent 3 notices. The granary keeper reported the scratched lock. Mary Pike appealed her rent mark. Each paper passed through my uncle's hand or was sent to Jasper Vane. They needed the mill to fail. Nathaniel said, "Why a ruined independent mill makes the river rights addendum appear necessary. Ravensmere could offer to rebuild in exchange for exclusive control, and evictions reduce the number of customary claims." Their eyes met. The same conclusion stood between them. If Vane designed this, she said, he expects the Duke to approve. Nathaniel's mouth went dry. Or expects him not to look, which is almost as useful. Elinor gathered the papers. Fatigue had hollowed the skin beneath her eyes, but her movements remained exact. Nathaniel wanted to tell her that Ravensmere would look now. He wanted to promise that every notice bearing his name would be examined. A promise from a false identity would be another theft. "You should rest," he said instead. "So should you. I am employed, and I am incapable of dismissal. A dangerous arrangement. For my uncle. Perhaps." They smiled at the same time. The small accord warmed the bleak schoolroom. A child peered around the partition, saw them, and giggled before vanishing. Elinor looked down at the papers with sudden colour in her cheeks. That evening, they found Wardmere's half of the indenture. Robert Shaw remembered that his grandfather had kept old mill documents in a tin box beneath the flour office. The flood had warped the boards, and Nathaniel pried them up while Elinor held the lantern. Beneath lay a rusted box full of mildew, mouse-nibbled receipts, and one folded sheet of vellum deliberately cut into deep scallops along its upper edge. Elinor carried it to the surviving workbench. "This is an indenture from 1762. Wardmere granted Ravensmere use of the upper race during repairs. but reserved the lower channel and mill intake to the village in perpetuity. This is one executed counterpart, Nathaniel said. The deliberate indenting proves it. Ravensmere's copy must bear the matching scallops. The counterpart should be in Ravensmere's archive. Nathaniel knew the muniment room. He had spent months ordering its deeds after his father's death. Vane had supervised the river files. Elinor wrapped the vellum in clean linen, returned it to the tin box, and sealed the lid with her personal signet. She, Nathaniel, and Robert Shaw signed a custody note across the wrapper. Elinor kept the only key at her belt, and every later opening would be witnessed and entered beneath their signatures. If the other half exists, she said, the addendum is not a consolidation. It is an attempt to make me surrender a right they already know is protected. I will search Ravensmere. How he had answered too quickly. Mr. Vane keeps clerks there, Nathaniel said. One may admit me. You speak of his house as if it were yours. The lantern flame moved between them. Nathaniel heard the storm water dripping through broken rafters. He had survived a collapsing mill more easily than her direct attention. I served there longer than my papers suggest. Why did you leave? I believed the master saw too little and demanded too much. Did you tell him? No. Then perhaps he saw less than he might have. The mercy of the observation was worse than accusation. Nathaniel looked at the half-indenture rather than her face. If a man discovers that those acting in his name have harmed people, does ignorance lessen his guilt? No. But what he does after discovery determines whether guilt becomes character. You make no allowance for regret. Regret is private. Repair is visible. He lifted his gaze. She stood within the circle of lantern light, damp hair escaping its pins. Mud dried at the hem of her dove-blue gown. Nathaniel had known women dressed in diamonds who seemed less luminous. Desire came not as a strike of beauty, but as recognition. He wanted to be the man she believed a guilty master might still become. Then we find the other half, he said. We find all of it. Jasper Vane arrived at Wardmere the following morning in a polished carriage with Ravensmere's crest upon the door. Nathaniel saw it from the estate room window and felt the old order closing around him. Vane stepped down in a fitted brown coat, immaculate boots, and gloves too pale for a flooded property. At 42, he possessed a pleasant face constructed for reassurance. Nathaniel had once mistaken that ease for competence. Elinor received him beside her father's chair. Sir Gideon stood near the fire. Miss Ward, Vane said, bowing. I hear you have endured a calamity. The mill failed after repair notices addressed to you and my uncle disappeared. His concern did not flicker. A grave allegation. It is a fact that the notices did not reach me. The allegation will depend upon where they stopped. Vane's eyes moved to Nathaniel. For half a heartbeat recognition widened them. Nathaniel's stare stopped, whatever name might have risen to his lips. This is Mr. Hale, Sir Gideon said. One of your temporary men. Apparently. Of course. Vane recovered with admirable speed. Hardly. I had expected you to remain at the West Office. Circumstances required initiative. Nathaniel said. Initiative is useful when directed. Elinor stepped between the unspoken meanings. Then, direct your attention to these eviction notices. They bear your signature and mark Relief Grain as unpaid rent. Vane examined Mary Pike's notice, as if seeing it for the first time. A copying error. Perhaps. 7 copying errors. All against holdings bordering the lower channel. Flood and exhaustion encourage patterns where none exist. So does fraud. Sir Gideon intervened. Enough. The river commissioners meet the following Monday. The water agreement will be presented there. The marriage trustees will review separate articles afterward. Until then, no more reckless accusations. Vane continued looking at Nathaniel. I should speak with my clerk alone. Mr. Hale is assisting Wardmere, Elinor said. He is employed by Ravensmere. Then, Ravensmere may send written instructions. Nathaniel had to lower his head to hide satisfaction. Vane found him that night in the coach house and dropped all pretense. Nathaniel named the false evictions, altered grain, and concealed customary rights. Vane called them necessities and argued that consolidation would save both estates when Gideon called Wardmere's mortgage. Miss Ward refused the addendum when she believed only a clerk could hear. Nathaniel said, "Then marry her. Take the river authority. Compensate the tenants elsewhere. And let me regularize the books. Everyone prospers except those you remove. A duke cannot govern by affection, nor by concealment. Leave Wardmere and present no paper to the river commissioners without my review." Nathaniel could not suspend Vane publicly without exposing the disguise, and no lawful ground yet permitted detention. He sent his loyal groom to record Vane's route, archive access, and contacts. The watch was observation, not custody, and Vane still held keys granted under Nathaniel's earlier authority. Nathaniel understood that private command was not repair, but it might preserve a trail until evidence could survive open action. When Vane had gone, Nathaniel remained in the dark coach house. He had removed a man from the room, not corrected the system that enabled him. Worse, he would meet Elinor at breakfast and answer to a name that was not his. She was waiting outside. He knew at once that she had heard voices, though not words. She held 2 cups of broth, steam rising into the cold. Mr. Vane left in haste, she said. He had business at Ravensmere, and I have business here. She offered him 1 cup. You looked as if you might forget supper again. Their fingers touched around the warm pottery. The intimacy of kindness nearly broke him. Elinor, Vane will no longer direct anything at Wardmere if I can prevent it. She grew still at the use of her name. The coach house door opened behind him. Sir Gideon's groom called that Sir Thomas could not breathe. Elinor ran before the cup struck the ground. They found her father gasping, his face grey. Nathaniel sent for the physician, while Elinor loosened Sir Thomas's collar and counted each breath. The attack eased before Dr. Ames arrived. But the old man's weakness deepened. Elinor sat beside him until morning, one hand around his. Nathaniel waited in the corridor because leaving felt impossible. At dawn she came out. The composure she had worn through flood and accusation had cracked around the edges. He may have weeks, she said, or hours. The physician will not say. I am sorry. Sir Gideon will use this. If father dies before the marriage settlement, my uncle controls the debt note and can petition to administer what remains. If I sign, I betray the tenants. If I refuse, I may lose the power to protect them. You will not face it alone. That is generous for an under-steward. It is not generosity. She looked at him then. Grief had stripped away caution. What is it? Nathaniel could not answer honestly without making the worst hour of her life about his confession. He took her cold hand between both of his. A promise, he said. No paper affecting the river will be approved without the truth being heard. Can you promise that he should have said no? Instead, the Duke of Ravensmere answered through Nate Hale's mouth. Yes. Elinor closed her eyes for one moment. Then I will trust you. The words gave him what he wanted, and made wanting it unbearable. Sir Thomas survived the day. While he slept, Elinor and Nathaniel resumed the inquiry in the estate room. Work was the only form of hope she trusted. They compared the Granary book with rent receipts, then held each page beside the window. The altered entries absorbed light differently. Nathaniel remembered that Ravensmere's office had received a new supply of blue-black iron ink in August. Wardmere still used a warmer brown mixture made by the schoolmaster. The editions were written with Ravensmere ink. He said, "Can ink be identified before a magistrate by a stationer?" Perhaps. If the recipe or invoice is distinctive. Mr. Cobb in Aylesbury supplies both estates. His order book may show who purchased it. Elinor made a note, then examined the hooked marks beside the targeted holdings. These are not numbers. Vane's private designation for acquisition. Her pencil stopped. You said you knew him only by reputation. Nathaniel felt the lie tighten. I saw his memoranda when I worked at Ravensmere, as an under-steward in the estate office, doing what reviewing reports, for whom the room seemed to narrow around her question. Nathaniel gave her the most truth his inquiry could survive and hated the cowardice of measuring it. For the Duke, Sir Gideon entered, carrying a sealed packet. The River Commissioners have advanced their sitting to Thursday. The Duke has sent notice that he will attend. The marriage trustees will remain separate. Nathaniel looked at the seal. It was his. Impressed by his solicitor on instructions sent before he left. The timing had been meant to preserve the disguise until the following Monday. Vane had moved the river sitting forward. Thursday is tomorrow, Elinor said. Precisely. You will support the water addendum before the commissioners. Then, the marriage trustees will receive the articles with Ravensmere's approval. This childish investigation ends. The Duke has not met me. He has reports. Nathaniel saw pain pass over her face. Reports had condemned her before his arrival. He had come disguised because he trusted those reports more than her right to meet him honestly. Then he may hear my report tomorrow, she said. Sir Gideon smiled without warmth. Wear something finer than that blue wool. A man may forgive stubbornness in a beautiful woman. If he requires beauty to forgive integrity, he will be disappointed twice. After her uncle left, Elinor turned to Nathaniel. You know what the River Commissioners will ask. Likely. Prepare me. He spent the afternoon teaching his future wife how to resist him. They rehearsed questions about debt, customary rights, and repairs. Nathaniel forced Elinor to distinguish fact from inference and to state the cost of refusal until fear no longer ruled her voice. If the marriage fails, Wardmere may be sold. Then I will give the tenants every record needed to defend their leases. What do you ask of Ravensmere? An open audit. Recognition of the indenture. Withdrawal of false arrears. And shared river oversight with elected mill users. You ask a duke to surrender power. I ask him to stop calling stolen power his. He would be a fool to underestimate you. He already has. Otherwise, he would have come himself. Night settled early. They carried papers to the library because Sir Thomas slept in the estate room. Wardmere's library was small, its books worn by use. Elinor lit only one lamp to spare oil. Nathaniel stood at the window and watched his own estate's lamps appear across the valley. Which light is Ravensmere Hall? She asked. The three above the cedar line. You know the view well. Yes. Did you hate it there? Sometimes. More often I hated what it asked of me. A house asks nothing. People place demands inside it. The title placed demands. She turned from the papers. You speak as if you carried it. Nathaniel faced her. The moment had come again. Stripped of interruption. Elinor. A loose shutter slammed outside. She startled, then laughed softly at herself. I faced a flood exhale with greater dignity. He smiled, despite the pressure in his chest. You were magnificent in the flood. I was vet. Frightened. And giving orders to anyone too tired to resist. You remembered the old channel. You saved the cottages. We saved them. The word entered the quiet between them. Nathaniel crossed the room. I have spent years believing I must carry every burden alone, because sharing it would mean weakness. Then I came here and watched you distribute authority more wisely in one night than I have in 7 years. That sounds very nearly like admiration. It is admiration. And concern I have not earned the right to name. Her eyes lifted to his. He stopped close enough to see gold around the hazel. Close enough that honesty was the only honorable movement left. I am not the man you believe me to be. He said. No one is only what another person believes. My name is not hoofbeats struck the drive. A carriage swept beneath the library windows. Black panels gleaming in lantern light. Jasper Vane stepped out with 2 commissioners and the Duke's senior solicitor. Elinor looked from the carriage to Nathaniel. They have come to prepare without waiting for morning. He closed his eyes once. The confession had waited too long. Now it would arrive as exposure. The commissioners entered Wardmere as if the storm had been arranged for their inconvenience. Mr. Alden, the Duke's senior solicitor, removed a damp cloak and stopped when he saw Nathaniel beside the library fire. Unlike Vane, he did not possess the talent of quick deception. Your Grace. 2 words destroyed Nate Hale. Elinor did not move. The room continued around her with terrible, ordinary detail. Rain ticked against the glass. A drop fell from Mr. Alden's cloak to the carpet. Vane closed the library door. Sir Gideon appeared behind the commissioners, satisfaction bright in his eyes. Nathaniel took off the rough coat because keeping it on had become an insult. Beneath it he wore the same plain waistcoat and linen. But posture and acknowledgement did what silk could not. The men bowed. Elinor stared at the stranger who had carried flour beside her, taken orders in the flood, held her hand outside her father's room, and promised that the truth would be heard. Elinor, he said, do not. Her voice was not loud. It stopped him more effectively than rank stopped other men. Sir Gideon spread his hands. My dear, surely you understand. His Grace wished to observe Wardmere without ceremony. An unconventional courtship. Perhaps. But a flattering one. She turned on her uncle. You knew, not until Mr. Vane informed me this afternoon. And you advanced the meeting. The Duke was already present. Why maintain a charade that had served its purpose? The word purpose struck Nathaniel. He saw the past week through Elinor's eyes, every question a test. Every shared difficulty, an opportunity for judgment. Every confidence given to a man who could withdraw the marriage and ruin her estate. Leave us, Nathaniel said. Sir Gideon began to object. All of you. The commissioners and solicitor withdrew. Vane lingered. You as well, Nathaniel said. When the door closed, Elinor checked the unbroken personal seal on the indenture box and placed the box beside her. Her hands were steady. Nathaniel would almost have preferred anger. How much was true? Everything I told you about the estate was true. Your name was not. Nathaniel is. You offered me the smallest piece of truth and expected gratitude for it. No. You said you had served at Ravensmere. You said the master saw too little. You asked whether ignorance lessened guilt. Did you enjoy constructing answers that were lies only in their shape? He accepted each blow. I was ashamed, when, at first, of what I heard through the door, then of Vane's actions, then of how easily I had believed him. After the flood, I was ashamed that I had not told you before you trusted me, and still you did not. I intended to. Intention is private. Repair is visible. His own lesson returned in her voice. Nathaniel felt the full justice of it. You are right. Her control faltered. Do not agree as if that makes you honorable. You came to judge whether I deserved to become your wife. You let me speak of losing my father, my home, and every family depending upon it, while you held the power to change the entire calculation. You prepared me to argue before you. Was that amusing? It was unbearable. Yet you bore it, because the moment Vane knew I had exposed myself, evidence could disappear. Evidence has disappeared for months, while you remained a duke in comfort. Do not make my trust another necessary sacrifice to your investigation. Nathaniel had no defense. He crossed to the desk and removed the signet ring he had kept on a chain beneath his shirt. He placed it beside the unsigned addendum. I did not come in comfort. I came suspicious of you. Vane told me you engineered the marriage to secure the river. I believed enough of it to disguise myself. What I heard should have ended the test at once. What I saw during the flood should have made honesty unavoidable. I delayed because the inquiry required secrecy, but also because you trusted Nate Hale in a way you would never have trusted the Duke of Ravensmere. I wanted to remain the man beside you. That was selfish. Elinor looked at the ring, not at him. You are always the Duke. The man beside me was real, only where it suited you. He was the truest part of me. Then why did he not tell the truth? Nathaniel had no answer that did not ask her to comfort him. She picked up the addendum and held it out. Here is what you came for. I will not sign it. I will not sign the marriage articles. Whatever affection I felt for the man who worked beside me cannot be transferred by legal fiction to the man who tested me. The formal words trembled at their edge. Nathaniel did not reach for the papers. I withdraw the water addendum. That is your decision as landowner. I will suspend every eviction and order an independent audit. That is your duty. I will not compel the marriage. You never could. He felt the truth of that more deeply than any rejection. A title could settle debt, command a carriage, and fill a room with bowing men. It could not produce consent. No, he said. I never could. Elinor placed the documents on the desk. The commissioners are waiting. The meeting reconvened in the drawing room because Sir Thomas could not be moved far. Nathaniel sat beside his solicitor rather than at the head of the table. Elinor remained by her father's chair. Sir Gideon presented Wardmere's debts. Vane presented estimates showing the ruined mill could be restored only through unified river management. The smoothness of their preparation revealed how long the calamity had been expected. When Elinor opened the box before the witnesses and produced Wardmere's counterpart, Vane gave a patient smile. An incomplete instrument without its matching counterpart. It may refer to a temporary arrangement, long extinguished. The surviving language says in perpetuity. She replied, a phrase may be qualified on the missing half. Then Ravensmere must produce its counterpart. Mr. Alden consulted a list. The deed does not appear in the principal index. Nathaniel watched Vane, who last ordered the river deeds. The former archivist. I believe. You supervised him. Several years ago. Then the archive will be sealed until it is searched by Mr. Alden and a clerk chosen by Miss Ward. Sir Gideon struck his cane against the floor. This is absurd. Wardmere cannot wait while old cupboards are emptied. The debt note matures. The Duke has offered marriage and rescue. The Duke has withdrawn no offer. Nathaniel said. Miss Ward has declined it. Silence followed. Sir Gideon looked at Elinor as though she had set fire to the house. You declined a duke while your father lies dying. Sir Thomas's hand moved. Elinor placed the slate beneath it. He labored over 2 words. Her choice. Nathaniel looked away before anyone saw what those words did to him. The river commissioners delayed their decision for 10 days. Separately, the marriage trustees refused to receive articles, while the facts remained disputed. Sir Gideon held the mortgage note through a London partnership and announced that he would demand payment at maturity. Nathaniel could buy it, but doing so immediately would turn rescue into pressure. He understood that power could corrupt even a generous act if the recipient was not free to refuse it. After the meeting, Nathaniel asked to see Sir Thomas alone. Elinor's face closed. Why? To confess to him as I confess to you. He cannot answer. He can refuse. She spoke quietly to her father. Sir Thomas considered Nathaniel, then tapped the chair beside the bed. Nathaniel sat. The old man's breath made a faint rasp. I came into your house under a false name because I believed reports that maligned your daughter. She proved those reports false within an hour. I remained because I found wrongdoing in my own office, and because I was a coward about losing the trust. She gave another name. I have withdrawn the addendum. I will expose the fraud. I will not purchase her consent by settling your debt. Sir Thomas lifted the slate. His pencil moved slowly. Do right when she hates you. Nathaniel read the sentence twice. Yes, sir. He left Wardmere that night. Elinor did not say farewell. Ravensmere Hall rose from the opposite ridge, in grey terraces of stone and cedar. Nathaniel entered through the front door wearing the rough coat. Servants stared before training restored their faces. He ordered the great dining room opened. Not for a bonker, but for an audit. By midnight, deed chests, account boxes, rent books, and correspondence covered the polished table. He summoned every senior employee and spoke without the protection of Vane's summaries. No eviction will proceed. No rent disputed by a receipt will be collected twice. Every tenant may submit a grievance directly to Mr. Alden or to a representative selected in the village. Jasper Vane is suspended from all authority pending inquiry. Any person destroying, moving, or altering estate records will be dismissed and prosecuted. The steward of the household cleared his throat. Your Grace. Mr. Vane left for London after the meeting. Send riders to the turnpike and the river road. Do not detain him by force. Record where he goes, and if he returns, admit him to no office. Nathaniel slept 2 hours in a chair, then searched the muniment room himself. The river drawer contained leases before 1750 and after 1770. The missing span was too neat to be accidental. A clerk found dust lines showing that a narrow deed box had recently been removed from the upper shelf. The archive key register bore Vane's initials on 3 summer dates. By afternoon, tenants filled the lower hall with receipts and notices. Nathaniel heard every household. Cancelled Mary Pike's false eviction. Suspended disputed collections. And recorded his own grant of authority beside each abuse committed under it. He promised prosecution only where evidence could sustain it. The distinction sounded like Elinor, which he took as an excellent sign. News reached him that evening that Elinor had moved from Wardmere House to the schoolroom while Sir Gideon inventoried furniture against the debt. Sir Thomas remained in his own room under the physician's protection. But March's men had locked the estate office. Nathaniel's first impulse was to cross the valley and throw them out. He wrote an order, then tore it in half. Wardmere was not his property. Elinor had not asked for his intervention. Instead, he sent a copy of every Ravensmere document relevant to the river, along with a note containing no request for forgiveness. You said truth first. Enclosed is everything found today, including the records that prove my negligence. Mr. Alden will deliver further copies to any person you name. I will take no step concerning Wardmere without your knowledge, unless life is in danger. He signed it, Nathaniel Harcourt. Without title. Elinor received the packet while teaching 3 mill children their letters. She recognized his hand from the penciled corrections in her ledger. For several minutes she could not open it. Is it from the Duke? Mrs. Finch asked. Yes. Should I put it in the stove? Elinor almost smiled. Not until we know whether it contains evidence. The papers were more complete than she expected. Nathaniel had included Vane's original reports, accusing her of seeking control of the river through marriage. He had annotated each unsupported statement with the source Vane claimed, and the failure to verify it. He had also included the authority under which Vane issued evictions. Signed by Nathaniel 2 years earlier. No excuse accompanied the signature. At the bottom of the packet lay a list of every tenant grievance received at Ravensmere that day. Mary Pike's notice had been cancelled. Grain rents were suspended pending audit. 2 elected villagers would attend future reviews. These were not enough to restore trust. They were visible. Elinor folded the note and placed it beneath the locked indenture box. She spent the next 4 days without Nathaniel and found him everywhere. At the damaged mill. She remembered his body turning back toward the trapped miller. In the granary. She remembered him stepping aside so her order would stand. In the schoolroom at night. She heard the way he had said her name before the carriage arrived. Affection did not disappear because its object had lied. It became grief with a pulse. She refused to let grief direct the inquiry. The stationer in Aylesbury confirmed that a special blue-black ink had been ordered in August by Jasper Vane and charged to Ravensmere. More important, he remembered delivering 1 small bottle to Sir Gideon at Vane's request. He copied the entry from his order book and affixed his seal. The coach house messenger book supplied another piece. Every sealed packet leaving Wardmere was entered by date. Destination, messenger, and fee. 3 repair notices Elinor had personally sent to Ravensmere did not appear on those dates. However, Sir Gideon's groom had made private journeys to Vane's office. Each fee was charged not to Sir Gideon, but to the river improvement account. He kept records of his own theft. Mrs. Finch observed. He kept records of journeys and assumed no one would ask what they carried. Will it be enough? Enough to ask the next question. The estate seal remained missing. Sir Gideon claimed Elinor had misplaced it while distributing relief grain. The false impressions on granary documents placed the seal at the heart of the fraud. Without it, Gideon could say the blurred wax had been made by any servant. Elinor searched her father's locked desk after receiving the key from his nurse. The velvet hollow where the seal belonged contained a smear of blue-black ink and 1 pale fibre. The fibre was not from blotting paper. It was fine wool dyed deep green. Sir Gideon's groom wore a green livery coat. When Elinor asked to speak with him, the groom had vanished. On the 6th morning, Sir Thomas Ward died as the first light touched the river. Elinor sat beside him with his hand in hers. He had not spoken her name in 2 years. Yet near the end, his lips shaped its beginning. She bent close. His gaze moved toward the window, toward the fields he had taught her to know, then returned to her. He touched 2 fingers to her wrist, as though counting a steady beat. When the breath left him, it did not return. Grief reduced the world to immediate tasks. Close his eyes. Call the physician. Tell Mrs. Finch. Send for the rector. Choose the dark coat he had worn at her mother's funeral. Elinor did each thing because not doing it would mean understanding. Sir Gideon arrived before the church bell finished tolling. He brought a lawyer and an inventory clerk. "The debt is now due from the estate," he said in the hall. "As Sir Thomas's nearest male relation and principal creditor, I must preserve assets." Elinor looked at him through a distance greater than the corridor. "My father is still in this house, and I regret his passing. Practical matters do not suspend themselves for sentiment. No. Men use practical matters to excuse the sentiments they are ashamed to name." He flushed. "You have no authority here now. I have possession until probate determines otherwise. The grain reserve is missing. The estate seal is missing. And the accounts bear alterations made while you managed them. You may discover probate asks questions of you." The threat was plain. Elinor felt fear. Not for the first time, but with a new loneliness. Then she saw two Ravensmere clerks waiting beyond the open door. One carried another packet. Nathaniel had continued sending records without crossing the boundary she set. "Let probate ask," she said. "I have questions of my own." She buried her father beneath the yew tree beside her mother. Tenants walked from every corner of Wardmere despite rain. Robert Shaw came on crutches. Mary Pike brought late rosemary. The school children stood in a line and sang the psalm Sir Thomas had requested years before. When death was an abstraction, Nathaniel remained at the rear of the churchyard without ducal carriage or household guard. He wore black, uncovered his head in the rain, and made no attempt to approach Elinor. She saw him. Anger rose. Then grief. Then an exhausted gratitude that he understood presence need not demand access. After the burial, Sir Gideon intercepted him by the Lick Gate. "Your Grace, surely this estrangement has gone far enough. Settle Wardmere's note. Marry the girl. And end the spectacle." Nathaniel's reply carried to those nearest. "Miss Ward is not a debt to be acquired. She will be penniless. That does not make her available." Elinor turned away before he could see the tears she had refused all morning. Nathaniel returned to Ravensmere and asked 7 representatives from farms, mill, mine, village, and estate offices to dismantle his draft tenant charter. They removed his right to appoint the chair, narrowed claims of private documents, and converted advisory votes into binding review over evictions, water changes, relief grain, and common rights. When Mr. Alden called it surrender, Nathaniel called it repair. On the 7th night, a fire broke out in Wardmere's West Granary. Elinor woke in the schoolroom to bells and orange light. She ran barefoot to the yard, dragging boots on over her stockings while men formed a bucket line. The blaze had begun near the record cupboard rather than the grain bins. Someone had piled straw beneath the shelves. "The books," she said. Mrs. Finch caught her arm. "You cannot enter." The side door burst open. Nathaniel emerged through smoke, carrying 2 account boxes. He set them on the wet stones and went back. "No." Elinor seized his sleeve as he turned. "Not again. The messenger book is inside. I copied it." He stopped. Relief and fierce approval crossed his face. "Of course you did." The roof beam cracked. They retreated as sparks leapt into the rain. Villagers saved the grain by rolling wet canvas over the bins. The records cupboard collapsed. When the fire was out, the constable found a lantern behind the hedge and boot prints leading toward Sir Gideon's east pasture. Sir Gideon himself arrived in a nightshirt beneath his coat and expressed outrage at the lawlessness Elinor's accusations had encouraged. "This was meant to destroy evidence," she said. or conceal your theft. He pointed toward the account boxes Nathaniel had carried out. The locks had been broken before the fire. Inside, the reserve grain receipts were gone. In their place lay the missing estate seal wrapped in a strip of dove blue wool. For a moment no one spoke. Elinor touched the torn edge of the fabric. It matched the hem of an old gown kept in her room. Someone had entered the house, cut it, and placed it with the seal. Sir Gideon's expression settled into sorrowful certainty. My poor niece, grief and pressure have unsettled you. The constable shifted uneasily. Miss Ward, I must ask who held these keys. My father, myself, and my uncle. Sir Thomas is dead. Yes. Nathaniel stepped forward. Elinor caught his gaze and shook her head once. If he used rank to end the question, every accusation of ducal interference would harden. He understood. He believed her innocent, yet knew that crushing the inquiry with rank would let Gideon call every later finding ducal invention. It cost him. But he stopped and allowed the lawful question to proceed. I will answer the constable, she said. I will also state that Sir Gideon's groom had access to the seal, that the ledger alterations use ink supplied through Jasper Vane, and that someone attempted to burn the very cupboard in which the planted objects were found. That is argument. Sir Gideon said, the seal is evidence. Yes, evidence of whoever expected us to accept the first story, it seemed to tell. The constable did not arrest her, but he required her to appear at the public tenant hearing already scheduled for Friday. Sir Gideon demanded the hearing move from Ravensmere to the Guildhall, where county commissioners and creditors could attend. Nathaniel agreed. The truth should not depend on whose roof contained it. After the yard emptied, Elinor found him beside the charred granary wall. His hands were burned red from the account boxes. You crossed the river without permission, she said. The bell was visible from Ravensmere. Life was in danger. You quoted my condition accurately. I have read your note more often than pride permits me to admit. She looked at his hands. Mrs. Finch has salve. They are nothing. You once objected when I worked through bleeding gloves. I was correct. So am I. In the schoolroom, she spread salve across his palm, while displaced record boxes crowded the desks. Neither spoke for several minutes. The last time she had held his hand, he had been Nate Hale, and her father had still lived. I am sorry about Sir Thomas, he said. He told you to do right when I hated you. Nathaniel looked at her sharply. You saw the slate he showed me after you left. I have tried. I know. The admission trembled between them is less than #0. 45# is greater than, and changed nothing quickly enough to be false. Knowing is not forgiving, she said. I do not expect forgiveness. You keep making choices as if you hope for it. I hope to become a man you could forgive. The distinction matters. Elinor wrapped linen around his palm. Then help me without speaking at the hearing, unless called. Anything. Do not say anything. That is more difficult for a duke. You have no idea. A quiet laugh escaped her before grief could prevent it. Nathaniel looked at her with such startled tenderness that she withdrew her hands. The other half of the indenture, she said. Have you found it? No. But the missing deed box left a line of red sealing sand on the archive shelf. The same sand was found in Vane's private office. His London rooms are empty. Then he may have taken it, or given it to Sir Gideon. The granary fire was too crude for Vane. My uncle prefers force when frightened. Vane prefers a route that makes every outcome profitable. Elinor thought of the addendum. The mill failure, the debt note, and the marriage. If the water agreement passed, Ravensmere gained control. If it failed after scandal, Wardmere was sold and the rights purchased at auction. If you married me, Vane remained agent over both systems. And if I discovered part of the fraud, Gideon appeared responsible. We need a link neither can explain away. They worked through the night at separate desks. Elinor reconstructed the messenger book from her copies. Nathaniel compared it with Ravensmere's gate log, a date repeated in both records, August 17th. Sir Gideon's groom left Wardmere carrying a long parcel. Vane entered Ravensmere's archive that afternoon. That evening, Vane departed through the north gate with a dispatch case and no recorded destination. The north gate, Elinor whispered. Her father's last written warning on Nathaniel's first day returned to her. Watch the north gate. He saw something, she said, before his illness worsened. The north gate at Wardmere faces the old toll cottage. Widow Finch's brother kept it until September. Mrs. Finch woke her brother before dawn. Samuel Finch remembered a brown carriage stopping near the north gate on August 17th. Jasper Vane met Sir Gideon's groom and exchanged a long tin box for a leather packet. Sir Thomas had watched from the upper window. He tried to tell Elinor later, but the stroke had taken speech and his slate message had been misunderstood as concern about a hinge. Would Samuel testify? Nathaniel asked. He fears Sir Gideon. Then I can guarantee his cottage. Elinor shook her head. If you pay for courage. Gideon will call it purchase. Samuel must choose. They went together without carriage or servants. Samuel Finch listened while Elinor explained the hearing. He twisted his cap in both hands. Sir Gideon can turn me out. He may turn me out as well, she said. I cannot promise safety I do not control. Ravensmere's new council can review any action affecting your cottage. But His Grace will not reward you for saying what we wish. Tell only what you saw. Samuel looked at Nathaniel. Is that true? Yes, even if what I saw harms you, especially then. Samuel straightened. I'll come. The hearing filled the Guildhall before noon on Friday. Farmers stood beside merchants. Servants beside creditors. Mill families beside county gentlemen who had arrived expecting scandal. At the front sat 3 commissioners. The magistrate and the constable. Sir Gideon occupied one table with his lawyer. Nathaniel sat at another with Mr. Alden and the unsigned council charter. He left the central place empty for Elinor. She entered wearing the dove blue gown. The hem had been repaired where fabric was cut from her wardrobe. Her brown hair was pinned plainly. She carried the tin box beneath one arm and 3 ledgers beneath the other. Whispering traveled through the room. She heard thief, jilted bride, and clever adventuress. She set the evidence down and faced the commissioners. I ask to speak for myself. Sir Gideon's lawyer rose. Miss Ward is not trained in law. Neither were the tenants whose rights were nearly taken by a legal addendum. They are entitled to language they understand. The chief commissioner considered her. Proceed. Elinor began with the river rather than the accusation against her. She described the Wardmere weir, the lower channel, and the mill intake. She showed repair requests and the dates they disappeared. Robert Shaw testified that Sir Gideon's man collected them. Amos Reed testified that Vane visited the granary before the false arrears appeared. The lawyer objected that poor administration was not conspiracy. I agree, Elinor said. So let us follow what changed after the administration failed. She displayed the rent ledger under strong window light. The blue-black editions stood against brown original entries. The Aylesbury stationer's sealed statement showed the ink had been delivered to Vane and a smaller bottle to Sir Gideon. Receipts proved each targeted tenant had paid or received authorized relief. A map showed all targeted holdings bordered the lower channel. Coincidence? Sir Gideon said. Then it is fortunate we have more than one. She opened the messenger book copy. Journeys charged to the river account corresponded with missing repair notices and Vane's visits. Samuel Finch testified about the exchange at the North Gate. His voice shook until Mary Pike took his hand before the entire hall. He described the long tin deed box. Sir Gideon's lawyer attacked his memory. You expect us to believe you recall a carriage from 3 months ago. It broke my fence backing around. Samuel said. A man remembers the carriage that kills his best pear tree. Laughter moved through the hall, releasing tension without weakening truth. Elinor unlocked the tin box before the commissioners, entered the opening on its signed custody sheet, and placed Wardmere's counterpart on a board. This vellum survived beneath the mill floor. Its language reserves the village intake in perpetuity, and its deliberately scalloped edge must fit the Ravensmere counterpart that disappeared from the archive. Speculation, the lawyer said. Where is the missing half? That is the question. The Granary fire was intended to prevent us asking. He turned to the commissioners. And now we arrive at Miss Ward's own wrongdoing. Reserve grain vanished under her management. The estate seal was found among records she controlled. Wrapped in cloth from her gown, the constable presented the seal and fabric. Murmurs rose again. Elinor waited until they subsided. The objects were discovered in a box whose lock had been broken before the fire. Whoever planted them wanted the discovery to end inquiry. It begins another. She asked for the seal. The constable handed it to the commissioner, who held it up. Observe the handle, Elinor said. My father's seal was walnut, worn smooth where his forefinger rested. This handle is new pearwood, darkened with stain. Sir Gideon went still. It is a copy, she continued. The real seal disappeared because its impressions would differ from those placed on false grain issues. The copy was planted so possession appeared to prove guilt. You cannot establish that by looking at wood, the lawyer said. No, but a craftsman can. The Wardmere cabinet maker came forward with his work ledger. In September, Sir Gideon's groom had ordered a pearwood handle sized to a sketch of the estate seal. He claimed it was for a draw pull. The cabinet maker remembered because no draw pull required a hole bored for a metal die. The lawyer's certainty weakened. At most, a servant copied the seal. Yes, the same servant whose livery fibre remained in the velvet hollow and who disappeared when I asked to question him. He may have acted alone. Then why burn the messenger record, linking his journeys to Sir Gideon and Mr. Vane? Sir Gideon rose. This is intolerable. My niece twists household accidents into persecution because the Duke rejected her. Nathaniel's body went rigid. He did not speak. Elinor turned to her uncle. The Duke did not reject me. I refused to marry him after learning he entered my home under a false name. The room erupted. The commissioner struck his gavel. Sir Gideon smiled as if she had offered him rescue. There, she confesses motive. Humiliated pride. My pride is not evidence. His deception is relevant because it allowed him to witness events before either of us understood the fraud. She looked at Nathaniel. This was the first time she had invited him into the case. Your Grace. Did you hear me discuss the water addendum on the evening of October 9th? He stood. Yes. Did I know your identity? No. What did I say that you would rather lose Wardmere than sign away the tenant's water? You refused the marriage if it required that act. Did my uncle tell you I understood and favored the agreement his collaborator did? Jasper Vane reported that you designed the marriage to gain control of the river. I believed enough of the report to test you in disguise. That failure of judgment is mine. Sir Gideon's lawyer objected. His Grace's romantic misunderstandings do not prove fraud. No, Elinor said. But his admission proves I opposed the addendum before I knew Refusal could earn his favor. It establishes the direction of my interest. Now we return to material proof. She took the unsigned addendum from the tin box. Along its upper left corner, a faint triangular stain marked the vellum. This document was prepared from a draft sent through Wardmere's office. My father spilled elderberry cordial across the packet when his hand failed. Only the first page was stained. The addendum presented later carries the same stain. Though Sir Gideon claimed it came directly from Ravensmere, she laid beside it a torn scrap recovered from the granary ashes. It bore the continuation of the stain and 3 embossed letters from a maker's watermark. The arsonist burned the record cupboard. But wet vellum does not burn readily. This scrap came from a wrapper hidden behind the shelf. Its watermark matches the stationery used in Jasper Vane's private office. And the writing on its inner fold says March copy. Sir Gideon's face lost colour. You found that after the fire, he said. Mrs. Finch found it while clearing the wall. The constable witnessed its removal. The Chief Commissioner leaned forward. Still, the missing counterpart would resolve the underlying right more decisively than inference. The Guildhall door opened. Jasper Vane stood between 2 turnpike officers. His polished appearance finally disturbed. Mr. Alden rose. Your Grace. The Dover Watch detained Mr. Vane under a civil warrant concerning removal of estate records. His dispatch case was registered at the inn, but placed in a coach bound north under another name. It has just arrived. The case was brought forward. Nathaniel did not open it. He gave the key to the constable. Inside lay correspondence, money drafts, and a long tin box. Elinor's heart struck once. Hard. The commissioner lifted Ravensmere's counterpart. Its deliberate scallops met Wardmere's edge exactly. And the 2 executed texts agreed. The village's right to the lower channel and mill intake stood clear in ink more than 50 years old. Vane looked at Sir Gideon. Sir Gideon looked away. Mr. Vane, the magistrate said, do you wish to explain possession of this deed? Vane's composure returned in fragments. I removed it for preservation during reordering. Why send it toward York, under another name I feared? His Grace's attachment to Miss Ward had compromised the inquiry. Nathaniel spoke before anger could make him eloquent. My attachment compromised nothing. My negligence allowed you authority. My concealment injured Miss Ward. Neither created the entries. Notices. False seal. Hidden date. Or fire. Elinor saw Vane calculate. He had survived by standing between powerful men and consequences. Now Nathaniel had stepped out of that arrangement. Sir Gideon directed the local measures. Vane said. Sir Gideon lunged to his feet. You designed every part. Their accusations collided. Each produced letters against the other. The elegant conspiracy broke not under a dramatic confession. But beneath the weight of records both men had preserved as protection. Vane's dispatches showed payments to Sir Gideon's groom. Gideon's lawyer held drafts, promising Vane a share of the mill company after Wardmere's forced sale. The grain had been removed to a warehouse leased under March's partnership and sold to fund the debt purchase. The magistrate ordered both men held for formal examination. The constable recovered the genuine estate seal from Vane's case. When Sir Gideon was led past Elinor, his fury gave way to something smaller. I was saving Wardmere. You were saving your ownership of it. She replied. You never understood the difference. The hall remained full after the doors closed. Fraud exposed did not repair a mill, restore grain, or settle Wardmere's legitimate debt. The Chief Commissioner looked toward Nathaniel. Your Grace, "What disposition do you propose?" Nathaniel placed the tenant council charter on the table. "First, let Miss Ward answer. The water right is hers to defend, and the affected households are not mine to dispose of." He stepped away from the central place. Elinor stood where he had been. The change was simple enough to be missed by anyone watching only ceremony. Those who understood power felt it. The 1,762 indenture should be reaffirmed. She said, "The East Channel should remain an emergency relief course under joint inspection. The mill users should elect 2 members to a permanent river council. No gate affecting another holding should be closed without recorded notice, except to preserve life. False arrears must be erased. Stolen grain restored. And every eviction reviewed in public minutes." The commissioners asked about cost. She presented estimates for a stone-lined East Channel, a new oak slice, and a wheel repair using labor paid from recovered warehouse funds. Nathaniel had not seen the final calculation. She had built it from miller's wages, timber quotes, and cart distances. Wardmere cannot contribute that sum while its debt remains. One creditor said, "The debt was purchased partly with proceeds from stolen grain and advanced through fraudulent pressure." Elinor replied, "Its lawful balance must be recalculated. Wardmere will honor what it truly owes." Nathaniel wanted to offer the rest. He waited. Mary Pike rose from the benches. "The village can give labor for the East Channel if labor counts against winter rent." Robert Shaw added, "The mill can repay timber from grinding fees over 5 years, with the fees fixed in council." Others offered carts, stone, and skilled work. The plan changed as the people affected entered it. Nathaniel understood that this was what he had mistaken for surrender. Shared authority did not weaken stewardship. It filled its blind places. The commissioners approved provisional terms. Ravensmere would fund immediate safety work as restitution for its agents' actions, not as purchase of Wardmere rights. The recovered fraud money would restore grain. The council charter would govern both estates' river decisions. Wardmere's lawful debt would be reduced and extended under independent trustees. Only then did Nathaniel speak again. "There is one further matter. Notices and alterations were issued under authority. I granted and failed to supervise. I entered Miss Ward's house disguised because I trusted slander more than direct honor. I continued the disguise after learning better. Rank made both failures easier. I state them publicly because repair cannot be built on a flattering version of events." The room was silent. "Miss Ward owes me no gratitude. Affection, or marriage. Her work saved lives during the flood. Her inquiry exposed the fraud. Her plan preserves the river. Any account suggesting that I rescued Wardmere is false." Elinor had prepared herself for his validation of the evidence. She had not prepared for him to surrender, the story powerful men usually claimed. The chief commissioner signed the order. Mary Pike began to clap. One by one. Others joined until the sound filled the Guildhall. It was not applause for a duke's declaration. It was for the woman standing over maps and accounts in a repaired blue gown. Elinor looked at Nathaniel across the table. He did not smile as though expecting reward. He bowed. Winter work began before the first frost. The council elected Elinor as chair, reviewed every eviction and river change, and rejected one of Nathaniel's proposals as too costly. He asked for the figures, accepted them, and withdrew it. He sent documents before decisions, admitted uncertainty in the minutes, and visited cottages without preparing their answers. Trust returned in measures too small for spectacle and too important to counterfeit. The probate trustees confirmed Elinor's right to manage Wardmere. When Nathaniel brought the first quarterly audit, it included a page naming his own errors and the people who had corrected them. "I believe you are sorry," she told him. "I believe the changes are real. I do not yet know what affection can survive," he answered. "Then do not force it to decide before it knows." She invited him to supper. Afterward, they burned Hale's rough coat in the estate room fire. Not because the man inside it was false, Elinor said, but because you no longer need poor cloth to listen. Nathaniel watched the disguise become ash and made no request for what might remain. Through January, they worked on leases, the school roof, and mill repairs. He asked permission before joining her tenant visits and listened when families changed their plans. One snowy afternoon, he offered his arm at an icy stile and waited. Elinor took it. "The first time you held my hand, you had not told me your name," she said. "I remember." "Good. The second time, you made a promise under that false name, and kept it too late to excuse the lie." She looked at him through falling snow. "Do not ask me yet. I will wait." By March, the new sluice gates were ready to be raised. The village gathered beside the mill. Robert Shaw gave Elinor the lever. She called Mary Pike and Samuel Finch to take it with her. Water entered the repaired race, caught the wheel, and turned it once. Then again. Flour dust drifted from the new floor like pale sunlight. Nathaniel stood among the council members. Not before them. Elinor found him after the cheers. "Walk with me," she said. They followed the east channel through the orchard. New stonework shone beneath clear water. At the place where they had pulled rocks during the storm, crocuses pushed through damaged earth. The trustees sent the final Wardmere settlement. She said, "The legitimate debt can be paid over 12 years. My mother's trust remains mine. The estate passes to me under father's will, subject to no control by a husband, if the marriage articles preserve it." Nathaniel's breath changed, but he said only, "I am glad." Mr. Alden also sent a draft marriage settlement, at whose request mine. He turned to her. "It gives Wardmere separate ownership, preserves my income, establishes independent trustees, and gives each of us one vote on the joint river council. Neither vote carries greater weight by title. Those are terms I would sign. You have not heard all of them. There are more. If either spouse conceals an estate action materially affecting the other, the injured spouse may compel disclosure through the trustees. Sensibly severe, the wife retains the right to continue estate management. Essential, and no husband may arrive disguised as an under-steward to test her character." Nathaniel looked solemn. "That clause may transform English law." I thought it prudent. They reached the old cider press. Water moved softly beyond the wall. "Elinor, are you proposing a contract?" "I am establishing conditions under which a proposal could be freely considered. Then I will try not to mistake one for the other." She studied the man before her. He had not become warm to everyone. He was still exacting, reserved, and capable of silencing a room with one glance. Change had not erased character. It had turned discipline outward and honesty inward. He no longer imagined love, excused duty. He had begun to understand love as the most demanding form of it. "You may ask now," she said, for the first time since she had known him. Nathaniel Harcourt looked entirely unguarded. "I loved you first, as a voice, refusing injustice behind a door. Then, as the woman who saw every person in a flood and gave each one useful courage. I loved you when you trusted me. And I loved you when you would not. I cannot promise never to fail your judgment. I can promise never again to hide failure in order to preserve your good opinion. Elinor Ward. Will you marry me as owner of your own estate, equal in our council, and sovereign over your choice? She let the silence remain is less than #0. 55 is greater than because he had finally learned not to fear what another person might place inside it. Yes, she said, but not because you saved Wardmere. I did not. Not because you are a duke, a fact I have occasionally regretted, and not because I have forgotten. I would never ask it. She stepped closer. I will marry you because when truth made you smaller in the eyes of the world, you chose to tell more of it, because you learned that authority should be answerable, because you came back without demanding the door open. Nathaniel's eyes closed briefly. May I inhale kiss you, you may. His hand rose to her cheek, with the same hesitation it had held beside the flooded mill. But this time he waited until she leaned into it. The kiss was gentle at first, almost reverent. Then months of restraint gave it warmth. Elinor held the lapels of his coat and felt his heart striking beneath them. No colder than any other man's, and far more honest than it had been. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. I had prepared sighs, a speech of considerable dignity. You used it. There was more. Save it for the commissioners. They married in May at Wardmere's parish church, after signing the independent settlement with the same care as the register. Mary Pike and Robert Shaw witnessed it. Mrs. Finch denied her tears. And the council lined the path with willow from both riverbanks. Nathaniel promised truth, respect, fidelity, and partnership. Elinor promised candor, constancy, and opposition before mistakes became harm. Their first year held disagreement as well as tenderness. They argued over drainage costs and the school kitchen. Then entered the disputed figures in public minutes. Nathaniel learned to leave bread beside Elinor's ledgers when she forgot meals. Elinor marked truly urgent letters with black ribbon, so he would not treat every envelope as catastrophe. At Ravensmere, she corrected delayed wages and injury payments because evidence required it. Not because marriage had made the house hers to decorate. Nathaniel worked beside her instead of watching from a doorway, exactly a year after the flood. The restored granary stood on higher stone piers. Its records protected by 3 elected key keepers. The school roof was sound. The mill wheel turned beneath gates, whose daily positions were written on a public board. No household had been evicted, and the council had amended proposals from both estates. Nathaniel brought the 2 executed indenture counterparts mounted together for the council chamber. The brass plate beneath them carried no crest. It read, "Rights survive when records remain public." At the meeting, a miller's apprentice challenged Nathaniel's drainage estimate. He corrected the figure and thanked him. Afterward, Nathaniel and Elinor walked beside the clear emergency channel. Wardmere showed through the orchard, and Ravensmere stood across the valley. Neither complete without the people between. At Elinor's request, they inspected the north gate before admiring anything else. Its hinge was repaired. The tall cottage roof was sound, and Samuel's replacement pear tree lived. She entered each fact in her notebook. Nathaniel leaned against the gatepost. Do you ever consider how close I came to believing Vane? You did believe him. You never soften the record. Records are not made kinder by becoming false. And yet you married me. That is not a contradiction. It is the part that came after. He took her hand. Noglave. False name. Hidden ring. Debt. Or title stood between their palms. When Nathaniel had entered Wardmere, dressed as an under-steward, He believed concealment would help him judge whether Elinor Ward deserved his name. A year of truth had taught him the better question is less than #0. 50 is greater than, and the only one love allowed him to answer whether he could deserve her trust.